and welcome to episode 45 of the Monday Night Review. Today we haven't done for a while, a complete badass women from history. So for those of you who have been sending me messages about your horror of the spooky or the true crime, you can have a little week off this week. I hope you're all well. We're having the Easter holidays at the moment and it's sunny and the ducklings are outside, but there is something wrong with my middle child's tummy, which is my absolute worst nightmare, and I can see a massive load of laundry in front of me. So if you're feeling like walking through treacle or the universe is not on your side, don't worry, it's not all daffodils and sunshine over here either. Today we're going to talk about someone who is not only, she's a triple threat for me, really. She's hugely important in women's entrepreneurial history. She is hugely influential in the world of makeup and beauty, which is my job. But also, she's recorded as the first female African-American self-made millionaire in the Guinness Book of World Records. So today we're going to talk about Madam C.J. Walker and a bit about her daughter, Alayla Walker. First off, we have to address, she may not be the first African-American female self-made millionaire. There are other women whose wealth is not as well documented as hers, but she is a complete influential badass, and one of the reasons her wealth is so documented is that she is incredibly outward-looking, philanthropic, vocal for the cause of African-American rights, but also women's rights. I almost feel, and I could be speaking out of turn, but I almost feel that for her, that they're sort of non-interchangeable in that she wants women to progress, she wants African-Americans to progress, she wants people to improve in their treatment of other people and for equality for all, and she bloody well walks the walk. This is who we're going to talk about today. As I said, she's particularly dear to my heart. She made her money developing and marketing a line of hair care and cosmetic products for black women. I'm a makeup artist. I've been a makeup artist for nearly 2 decades, and we still have a thing where we talk about brands launching, new brands, old brands. If people ask me why I do or don't like a company, quite a lot of it will do with whether it caters to women of all colours. And it's still, the fact that it's still talked about today, almost over 100 years after C.J. Walker, is pretty epic to think that she created an entire company and made her millions based on this one concept, and yet it's something that we still get so badly wrong today. In 1910, she sets up the C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, designed specifically for women of colour and based on her own experience with hair and scalp issues from having used unsuitable products for years. And I've watched some documentaries on her and such interesting interviews with women who work for her company. And they're all just, I've seen women saying, black hair at the time was unruly. It didn't matter what you did to it, it was unruly. There was nothing we could do with it. And women who owned beauty parlours who catered to white women, so would be doing the high-end white women in the town at the time, but were unable to do their own hair. And a couple of them said, until C.J. Walker came along, I had no idea how to look after my own hair at all, because there was just no products available, no training available, and no interest in it. From the perspective of those in the industry, those around, black hair was not a priority. So let's get into it. So Walker's actually born Sarah Breedlove in Delta, Louisiana in December 1867. She's one of 6 children, but she's the first of the siblings to be born free after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. So she was born, her parents were slaves but had just recently been freed. which it was a huge deal for the family, but her mother dies of cholera in 1872 and her father dies a year later. So she's orphaned by the time that she's 7. So she moves to Mississippi to live with her eldest sister, Luvenia, and her husband, Jesse Powell, and Walker gets a job as a domestic servant. She then marries Moses McWilliams when she's 14, primarily to escape the abuse that she gets from her brother-in-law. And 3 years later, they have a daughter, Lelia. So Moses dies in 1887, leaving Sarah aged only 20 with a 2-year-old daughter. Domestic servant, black woman, not an ideal situation. In 1888, Sarah decides to move with her daughter to St. Louis, where 3 of her brothers lived. And it's here that she finds work as a laundress. She earns barely more than $1 a day. And she, it's not looking good for her, but she is born with this incredible ambition and determination. And she sings at the St. Paul African Methodist Church, and she is very aware of the difference between herself and the educated community of women at her church. She herself had, she says, about 3 months worth of education, and most of that was Sunday school, and she wants more for her daughter. She wants a better life for her and her daughter, but she is determined that her daughter will be educated. And I feel like this determination is a lot of how she gets to where she's going, because she's really determined to get her daughter that education. So throughout her life until now, Sarah has suffered with severe dandruff and other scalp ailments. She's got baldness, she's losing her hair, and she's basically got this skin disorder on her scalp. She's been using really harsh products to cleanse her hair and wash her clothes. There is no products specified for Afro hair. And I mean, it's not unusual for women at the time to have hair issues. There's poor diet, illnesses, infrequent bathing and hair washing. Most Americans had no indoor plumbing, no central heating and electricity, but particularly in the black community, there's no product suitable for the hair, and you are not, if you're working and you're in domestic service, you are obviously not in a position where you will have the time or the money luxury of being able to spend time looking after yourself. Sarah initially learns about hair from her brothers, though, who are barbers in St. Louis, and she gets a job in a chemist. And to supplement her income, she starts working as a commission agent selling products for Annie Malone, who is an African-American hair care entrepreneur. And she owns a company called the Poro Company. And the chemist asks Sarah, what is this product you're selling on the side? Tell me about it. And she explains. And he says, well, why don't you give me some of that and I will analyze the ingredients and I'll tell you what's in it. And you can make your own version. You can add or take away or change and adapt it to whatever you think would be better. And then you'll make your own money, which he sounds like an incredible guy. And so that's what he does. He tells her what's in it. And then she starts to develop her own product line. And eventually Annie Malone would be one of her biggest rivals. And there was a problem that came through that. But at the time, Afro hair is just seen as this problem. It should be covered or straightened or tied up and out of the way. And this contributes to the hair and scalp problems that Sarah's had herself and loads of women were suffering from. But for Sarah, Afro hair wasn't a problem. It wasn't the hair that's the problem. It's not knowing how to look after it and not having the right products to look after it. And that is why she is so incredibly successful. It's seen as a problem to be solved, and she realizes it's not that is the problem to be solved. It's the lack of understanding and the lack of suitable products. So she also seems to really understand a woman's connection to her hair, the right to feel comfortable and confident with your hair. And she knows that not only do all women deserve this, but women of colour deserve this. And that's where she goes in and makes a huge difference. So in 1894, she marries her second husband, John Davis, but it doesn't last long. She leaves him in 1903. And in 1905, at 37 years old, Sarah and her daughter moved to Denver, Colorado, where she continues to sell products for Malone and develop her own hair care business. And eventually, Malone accuses Sarah of stealing her formula, which is a mixture of petroleum jelly and sulfur, and that's been around for 100 years. But it just, I think, gives Sarah the impetus to just go for it with her own business. And in 1906, she marries her for a third time, and this is to Charles Joseph Walker, who she'd known in Missouri and who seems to be a really supportive, good guy. And she then changes her name. She's no longer Sarah Breedlove. She becomes Madam C.J. Walker. And her daughter also adopts her stepfather's name, and adds an A to the front. So she becomes Alelia Walker. And Walker markets herself as an independent hairdresser and retailer of cosmetic creams. And Charles is her business partner. And he is really influential in advising on advertising and promotion. And this is a huge reason why Madam C.J. Walker is so successful. She absolutely nails the advertising and she works non-stop. So she initially sells her products door to door. She not only sells the products, she teaches other black women how to groom, style their hair, how to use the products. And by the end of 1906, she's ready to expand. I know how important it is to show results and to understand how products work and understand how products can help the consumer. And I feel like CJ Walker is just nailing it from the get-go. She has suffered herself. She has had these ongoing dandruff, scalp problems, hair loss for so long, and these products have worked for her. So who better to go door to door teaching these women about it? And so she's ready to expand. She puts 22-year-old Alelia in charge of the mail order operation in Denver, and she and Charles travel throughout the southern and eastern United States, expanding the business. And in 1908, they relocate to Pittsburgh, where she opens a beauty parlor and establishes the Lelia College to train people how to use the product, but also how to work with Afro hair. She is a huge advocate at the same time for black women's economic independence and therefore women's economic independence. And she opens a training program called the Walker System for a national network of licensed sale agents who earn healthy commissions. So not only is she teaching, she's not just selling a product, she's designing a product, selling a product, but she's teaching women how to use this product. She's teaching women how to set up and run their own businesses, and she's giving them the opportunity to do that. After she closes her business in Denver in 1907, and Alelia joins her in Pittsburgh, where she would eventually take over running the day-to-day operations, while Walker goes and establishes a new base in Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is basically where it ends up being the main headquarters for Madam C.J. Walker. But Alelia cleverly persuades her mother to establish an office and beauty salon in New York's growing Harlem neighborhood, which is becoming the center of African American culture. And so they do that in 1913. But in 1910, In Indianapolis, C.J. Walker establishes the headquarters for the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. She purchases a house and a factory at 640 Northwest Street, and later builds a factory, hair salon and beauty school to train her sales agents, and she adds a lab to help with research. By this time, she's got about 24 products in the line, which includes a hot comb, a pomade, and men's hair care as well. And throughout her career, she ensures that the majority of staff are women. She develops this method of grooming, and it's designed to have a healthy scalp, to promote hair growth and to condition the scalp. So though it's not without competition, it's just hugely successful between 1911 and 1919, and they employed several thousand women sales agents for its products. I'm reading a completely different book, and last night I got to a bit and I just wanted to read it to you. It's From Anything Goes by Lucy Moore, which is a biography of the Roaring Twenties. And I just thought it was so interesting that I was planning on doing this episode today, and I read this. So it said, in 1920, there were only 750 beauty salons in New York. That number had risen to 3,000 by 1925. So that's 5 years. And in 1930, there were 40,000 nationwide. Madam C.J. Walker had made her fortune with her hair dekinker in Harlem, and then in downtown. And Elizabeth Arden and Helena Rubinstein were launching flourishing business empires. So it was... She was... I mean, probably you've all heard of Elizabeth Arden. She is the person for African American hair and skin. She's also, from the get-go, not only is she training women, giving them vital business knowledge and control over their own earning power, she's also really passionate about African American rights, women's rights, African American women's rights, and she is not afraid to speak out. In 1912, she addresses the annual gathering of the National Negro Business League from the convention floor, and she says, "I am a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there I was promoted to the wash tub. From there I was promoted to the cook kitchen. And from there I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations. I have built my own factory on my own ground." And the following year she addresses the convention goers from the podium as a keynote speaker. She is a massive advocate for... She's just incredible. In 1912, she divorces Charles, and then in 1913, Alelia moves to a new townhouse in Harlem, and Walker joins her in 1917. So she leaves the day-to-day operation of her company to the management team in Indianapolis and heads to New York. In 1917, she commissions Vertner Tandy, who's the first licensed black architect in New York City, to design her house in Irvington-on-Hudson in New York. The house is called Villa Lewaro, and it cost $250,000, which is about $5 million in today's money. That can't be right. To build. And Walker hoped it would become a gathering place for community leaders and an inspiration to other African Americans to pursue their dreams. And she moves into the house in May 1918, hosts an opening event, which not only obviously is a housewarming party, but it honours Emmett J. Scott, who's at the time the Assistant Secretary for Negro Affairs for the US Department of War. So you can see I just love the fact that she's like, I'm going to build a house. I'm not only going to build a house, I'm going to build a house and celebrate someone else and make it about someone else. She seems to be incredibly selfless and vocal for other people. She's incredibly entrepreneurial and hardworking. By 1917, the company claimed to have trained nearly 20,000 women. She understands the power of advertising and brand awareness. She advertises heavily in African American newspapers and magazines and takes frequent travels to promote her products. She's on the road all the time. Her adverts, I will hopefully have tracked some down, so I will post them on our social media. But they are just incredibly well done, and you can see why they're so successful. She also shows other Black women how to budget, build their own business, and encourages them to become financially independent. And in 1917, inspired by the model of the National Association of Coloured Women, she begins organising sales agents in state and local clubs. So this results in the establishment of the National Beauty, Culturist and Benevolent Association of Madam C.J. Walker Agents, which is a bit of a mouthful. And they have their first annual conference in Philadelphia during the summer of 1917, and 200 people go. It's possibly the first national gathering of women entrepreneurs to discuss business and commerce. During the convention, she gives prizes to women who sold the most products, bought the newest sales agents, but she also rewards those who made the largest contributions to charities in their communities. She is constantly supporting charities. She is constantly supporting the anti-lynching bill. She is supporting I've got a list of them. She dies in May at the Walker dies on May the 25th, 1919, at the age of 51. She dies from kidney failure and complications of hypertension, high blood pressure, and her star does not diminish. It's, if anything, her name becomes even more widely known in the 1920s because her market is able to expand beyond the United States to Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Panama and Costa Rica. At the time of her death, she's considered to be worth between $500,000 and $1 million, making her the wealthiest African-American woman in America, as far as we know. But I love this quote from her in 1917, where she says, though she's not yet a millionaire, she hoped to be sometime, not that she wanted money for herself, but for the good that she could do with it. And after her death, her daughter Alelia Walker becomes the president of the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, and she remains the face of the Walker Company. But the day-to-day operations are overseen by attorney F.B. Ransom, who has been in the business from early on and works there until his death in 1947. And there's the factory manager, Alice Kelly, who basically runs the Indianapolis headquarters. And during the 1920s, Alelia Walker becomes a real key part of Harlem's dynamic social life. She's a patron of the arts. She is a hostess to some of the most notable social gatherings at the time. Langston Hughes calls her the joy goddess of Harlem. And she is herself incredibly influential, as especially, I think, at the time where there's all the flappers and this, in a non-judgmental way, I'm using bunny ears, irresponsible living where it's all about partying and cocaine and smoking and being as thin as possible. And what I really like about Alelia Walker is she is a hostess and part of this huge social scene, but she has her mother's social conscience. So she is very philanthropic. She is incredibly involved in sort of the music industry and people of the time, and she just seems to support art and artists and people in a way that seems to be a continuation of the way her mother lived. The Walker Company's sales do begin to suffer in 1929 with the beginning of the Great Depression, and Alelia is forced to sell some art and antiques, but she continues to live the high life, and she herself dies in 1931 of a cerebral hemorrhage that's brought on by hypertension, so not unlike what her mother dies of. But she dies surrounded by her friends. They've travelled to, I can't remember where they've travelled to. They've travelled somewhere on the train to have a party where they eat lobster and drink champagne, despite it being prohibition and the Great Depression at the time. And I sort of love the idea that she goes out with a bang. She has an adopted daughter, May Walker, who becomes the company president from 1931 until her own death in 1945. And then her daughter, Alelia May Perry Bundles, succeeds her mother as the head of the company, so it becomes a fourth generation succession. The company's building today is known as the Madam Walker Theatre Centre and is a National Historic Landmark. So in March of 2020, Sundial Brands revived the brand name as Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Culture, and it's sold in Sephora. So if you see that, you know who it's referring to. An incredibly huge influence in not only women's history, African American history, but also the beauty industry. In her will, Walker bequeathed nearly $100,000 to orphanages, institutes, and individuals. Her will directed 2/3 of future net profits to her estate to charity, and that is the incredible story, very briefly told, of Madam C.J. Walker. I hope you enjoyed that episode. So in 2020, Octavia Spencer, who, if you saw The Help, it plays Minnie in The Help, who is incredible, and she plays Walker in the series Self-Made, which has a lot of, I think, factual inaccuracies, but is based on the life of C.J. Walker. So if you want to watch that, you can. There's also a documentary from 1987 called $2 and a Dream. There's so much information out there that you can read and have a look at. And I'd love to hear from you, so do send an email to the Monday Night Review @gmail.com. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at the Monday Night Review.